No baseball draft would have collected the characters and flamboyant players that made their way to St. Louis in 1934.
To begin with, a rowdy team is a team that is destined to be loved, more so than a mere winner. It has always been that way. Firebrands are easy to forgive, which is why the baseball public liked Ty Cobb, despite his quintessential nastiness. Clowns are beloved and remembered long after heroes are forgotten. For proof, there are the old Daffy Dodgers and the early Mets. A swaggering team catches the popular fancy and keeps it. And if it happens to win as well, then it becomes a team for the ages. That is what the Gashouse gang was all about. An even blend of firebrand, clown, and swashbuckler. People tend to forget that for all their rollicking nonsense, the Gashouses were champions only once. They formed in the early 30s, principally in the spirit of Pepper Martin, who stole the World Series from Connie Mack's last great Philadelphia athletic team in 1931. Apart from Martin, who was just a kid, and the stormy Frankie Frisch, the Cardinals of 1931 were hardly Gashousers. But in the next 3 years, most every player they added was some sort of nut.
You know, it gives me a great thrill to go out there on the diamond and on the pitching mound to pitch to some great hitter with 2 or 3 men on bases and get them out. You know, cold chills just goes all over me whenever I get that man out.
Dizzy Dean arrived for good in 1932, along with hard-boiled ducky Joe Medwick.
Joe, you're within 2 of a World Series record. Do you think you'll break it today as far as hits are concerned?
Well, Pep, I'll be trying my best.
Then Ripper Collins, an eminent prankster, came along, followed by Dizzy's brother Paul and Lippy Leo DeRocha, who was as fresh as any punk off any street corner. A pitching staff evolved that could hold its own in any saloon. And with the help of several well-publicized outrages, mostly in hotels and on trains, the Gashouse gang myth was officially charted.
Actually, all the trappings of myth aside, there were shades of opinion on the Gashouse gang. For all of his media appeal, Dizzy Dean was basically a braggart, which turned a lot of people off. His brother Paul was really just a quiet bloke, quiet and sober, and by no means daffy. And Joe Medwick was basically just a hard guy from Jersey, and no one to fool around with. The one chap who was genuinely a character for all the ages was Pepper Martin, the irrepressible wild horse of the Osage, so-called, fun-loving but not mean, and an original comic. It was Pepper who orchestrated that celebrated Marx Brothers caper in a Philadelphia hotel, in which the lads tried to dismantle the sink of the hotel barber shop. Manager Frankie Frisch was Pepper's favorite foil, much as Margaret Dumont was Groucho's.
But then there wasn't a team in baseball that faintly resembled the Vienna Boys Choir. These were roistering baseball times. The public favored nonsense from its ballplayers, there being little else to laugh about with the country in the pits of the Depression. The Gashouses were probably no more outrageous than the Cubs of the time, or the Dodgers. But the Cardinals did have one wonderful season in 1934. Dizzy Dean won 30 games that year, and brother Paul won 19. Medwick, Collins, and Frisch all had fine seasons. Still, this team wasn't as good as the Giants or even the Cubs. What they did have, that the others didn't, was some wonderful motivation, plus some help of the strangest sort.
There was a twist in that pennant race that could have only happened in baseball, with its tight sociology and intense interaction of personalities. Back during the previous winter, Giants manager Bill Terry had been sitting around, hot-stoving with the boys over drinks, and he had quipped, "Is Brooklyn still in the league?" It was just another dandy little cheap shot in the ancient feud between the Giants and the Dodgers, but it would decide the pennant 8 months later. For the Giants came down the stretch of September with a huge lead over the Gashouse gang. But much to their subsequent regret, the Dodgers were still in the league.
If only just barely. Under young Casey Stengel, the Dodgers were lumbering to another 6th-place finish. They had only Van Lingle Mungo and the fading, booze-ridden Hack Wilson to redeem them. They were no longer even funny. But in the last 2 days of the season, with their angry fans serenading Terry and his Giants with cowbells, the Dodgers beat the Giants twice, and the Cardinals won the pennant. For opponents in the series, the Cardinals drew a fine Detroit Tiger team. The Tigers were called the G-Men, a tribute to the lusty hitting threesome of Hank Greenberg, Charlie Gehringer, Goose Goslin. They formed the heart of their batting order. The soul of the team, however, was catcher Mickey Cochran, who was also their manager. They were solid throughout, with shortstop Billy Rogale, outfielders Pete Fox and Gerald Walker. For pitchers, they had Tommy Bridges, Eldon Ocker, Frippo Marbury, and Schoolboy Rowe. Rowe was a rube who tickled the entire nation when he blurted in the middle of a radio interview, "How am I doing, Edna?" Detroit was favored, but with the Deans pitching well, the series rolled back and forth and came down to a 7th game in Detroit, where in one afternoon, Dizzy Dean became a national pet and the legend of the Gashouses was cemented for all time. But let's let Leo DeRocha, no less, tell you all about that.
Ball players don't come scrappier than Pepper Martin and Ducky Medwick, more talented than Dizzy Dean, tougher than manager Frankie Fritz. In the 1934 World Series, we took on Detroit, Gashouse style, no holds barred. They used to say that we'd knock over our grandmothers to get an extra base. In the 5th game, Dizzy Dean went into second base standing up to make sure Martin wasn't doubled at first. The first thing Dizzy said when he came to was, "Did they get Pepper?" What the Gashouse gang lacked in talent, they made up in guts. In the last game, we were winning 9-0, but still Medwick started the fight, sliding in the 3rd. Got back to the outfield, the Detroit fans were ready for him. They threw everything they could lay their hands on. I don't even know where they got half the stuff. Kennesaw Mountain Landis was commissioner of baseball, and the old judge called Frisch and Medwick over. He asked Ducky if he had kicked the Tiger third baseman. Medwick said, "Yeah, but that's the way I always slide." Judge Landis ordered Medwick out of the game, but not for fighting. He was the only man ever thrown out of a World Series for his own protection.
The Tigers, a relatively genteel and dignified bunch, found losing to such blowhards a little difficult to bear. To this point, Detroit had never won a World Series, and so it was justice of a sort that brought them back the next year, while the Gashouse gang faded to second place. This time, Detroit won, beating the Chicago Cubs in 6 games. And it was Goose Goslin who delivered the hit that gave Detroit its first championship.
And the Goose later recalled, "It was a lucky hit. That's all it was. I mean, you've got to be lucky to be up there at the right time. I hadn't had a hit all day in that game, and when I came to bat there in the 9th inning with 2 out and Mickey Cochran on second base, I said to the umpire, if he pitches that ball over the plate, you can take that monkey suit off." Well, sure enough, the first ball that Larry French threw in there, zoom. Oh, did those Tiger fans roar. I will never forget it.
As for the Gashouse gang, it faded fast. After the rousing triumph of 1934, the eclipse began when Dizzy Dean took a line drive from Earl Averill off his big toe in an all-star game, though it was more Dizzy's big head than his big toe that brought him down.
Well, Paul, you got married about a month ago, and I've been married 4 years, and I want to give you a little advice on married life. Always wear the pants of the family, and don't go in there and sweep floors and wash the dishes like they're going to ask you to. Be the big boss, see, at all times.
Is that so? You might be the boss on the mound, but I'm the boss at home. Here, go in there and sweep that kitchen.
Medwick was Bean and was never quite the same thereafter. Martin burned out young, and Daffy burned out even younger. It was the hard life, as much as their hard luck, that brought the Gashouse gang down.
We received our education in the cities of the nation, me and Paul.
Perhaps sensing the characters endure only in the myths, wily Branch Rickey replaced the Gashouses with much more steady and sober sorts. The successors to the Gashouses formed a better team that got better results, but they were nowhere near as much fun. This is Clark Booth reporting.